Hi guys, so back with another part 3 of my big band Logic template walkthrough, and we're going to look at the rhythm section today. And there are quite a lot of companies' sample libraries in this section, unlike the other two videos where we had kind of maybe one, maybe two companies per instrument. This has got a whole host of different sample libraries. We've got samples from Cinesamples, Spectrasonics, ProjectSAM, Straight Ahead Samples, Orange Tree Samples, IK Multimedia, Sound Dust, and Ujam instruments as well. So plenty of different things going on, and we're going to take a look at that today. We've got some pianos, we've got some drums, we've got bass, guitars, auxiliary percussion, and some alternatives to those instruments too, for different styles of arrangements, if we're into pop or funk arrangements rather than your kind of traditional jazz swing arrangements. So let's head over into Logic and we'll have a look at what we've got. So here I am in Logic. I've got a simpler template just to lighten the load a little. I've taken the saxophones, the trumpets and the trombones out because we're concentrating on the rhythm section. And as you can see, there's quite a few instruments going on here. Quite a few for us to play with. So we're going to kick off with the piano, and this is what my Logic template will open up at by default for me to start sketching, start writing. And it's just Keyscape. It's Keyscape's Yamaha C7 grand piano. Sounds like this. Lovely. It does the job and it sounds fantastic. It's really detailed. I don't find the need to really dig into it any more than that because it just works right out of the box, and it's great for sketching. It's a great inspirational kind of sound for writing piano parts, for comping, and all that jazz. It's the most important instrument really in this whole template because it's where I begin, it's where I start sketching things out, and it sounds great to boot. So yeah, brilliant. That's the Keyscape piano. I do have another piano in here as well. This is the piano in blue from Cinesamples, and it's actually, I think it's 1929, maybe 49, Steinway. And it's the piano that Bill Evans used on a lot of recordings. So it's got that kind of jazzy tape kind of sound, very, very classic vibe to it. And I use this when the piano's a little bit more exposed, or there's a piano solo, or it's a stripped back arrangement of a kind of bluesy kind of trio tune. Lots of different places where it works best. And it has much more of a jazzy vibe than that Keyscape C7. So this is the piano in blue. It's much warmer, and there's a lot more you can do with this as well. You can kind of introduce some tape noise, should you want, to give it that extra vibe. A vintage mono mode. It really sounds great, and this is what I used for pretty much everything before I got Keyscape, because it's just such a unique piano sound. It's really got that, it sounds like it's steeped in that history, you know. So it's great for those kind of more traditional jazz arrangements, traditional swing arrangements, and yeah, I love it. It's great sound. So that's Cinesamples piano in blue. And next up, we're going to have a look at some of the electric pianos. So as you can probably have guessed, we're going back to Keyscape. And Keyscape Rhodes I've got here, which is what I would load up by default. I'd probably end up using some different electric pianos, occasionally whirlies, different kinds of Rhodes, pianettes and things like that. And Keyscape's got that covered too. I just have an EP track here that does the job for putting a Rhodes in, and then I can tweak that and change to whatever sound that I want later. There's no point in me having, 8 or 9 instances of Keyscape to have all those different sounds at once. So this is the Rhodes. So that is the electric piano. That's the Rhodes from Keyscape. And yeah, they're the pianos. Electric pianos, acoustic pianos. The Keyscape Grand I will occasionally swap out for the wing upright. If I need an upright, it's not very common at all that I'd need that. A Grand usually does the trick, especially when buried in a mix of 17 or so players. So yeah, stick with those. That it's for my template, the basic template. Those do the job. Now, electric bass. This has changed recently. I did use the is it E Instruments, the Native Instruments Fender Jazz bass, the Scarby one, and that was brilliant. It did the job. But I've recently picked up IK Multimedia's MODOBass. Now you may have heard about this. This is entirely modeled. It's not samples. It's purely maths that's creating this sound, and it sounds fantastic. It sounds like a real bass, and it's brilliant. I do have the Modo drum, and I couldn't quite get the hang of using that in a mix. I'm sure with a lot more time with it, I would be able to. But this Modo bass is brilliant, and this is the kind of what it opens up to is the standard bass setup for a which one are we on here? This is a 60s P bass. Which is the actual bass we have here at home. So it kind of does the job for filling that gap and just getting some ideas down. And it sounds like this. Great thing, that pitch bend actually is not just a standard pitch bend, it's sliding through the frets. So there's so many things in this that you can't typically do with sample libraries that you can do with this kind of physically modeled style of plugin. It does take a bit of a bigger hit on the CPU and trying to screen record and record audio and everything whilst this is playing. Struggling a little bit, but it is good. It is good and usually runs perfectly fine. And you've got all of these different bass models right the way through to various different instruments. The one I like to use as well is this kind of the violin bass, and it's got that kind of muted sound to it, much more muted texture that really works in some kind of more classic arrangements. And other things you can do with this, if I just head back to the P bass that we had before, the fact that there are no samples means you can tweak this bass to incredible levels. You can change the play style from classic kind of fingered playing to more of a pick bass. If you need that brighter sound, and then even a slap. You can change the muting if you wanted it to be slightly more muted. I'll just head back to the finger playing. Just for comparison, this is without the muting. Brilliant. It's fantastic. So many other things you can change. The kind of the touch, whether you let notes ring. On the strings menu, you can change the gauge of them, the type of string, flat wound, round wound, the age of them, the action, heavy action, the number of strings. If you wanted a 5 or 6 string P bass, job done. If you needed a 6 string any other kind of model of the bass, you can do that too. It's the beauty of a kind of physically modeled instrument. The electronics, change your pickups, change all of the circuitry, and then there is an amp setup part of the instrument as well that will allow you to kind of tweak what kind of amp, the pedal board, and all of that extra stuff as well. So really great, and it's a lot more detailed than the Scarby one, because you can tweak all of this stuff that wouldn't be possible with a sampled instrument. And it's definitely a good kind of money's worth for a plugin. It's a little bit on the higher end price wise, but there are so many different models there that you can tweak, and there is a light version, I think, as well. That yeah, it's great for getting those ideas down. Obviously, a real bass will always be better, but this is great for getting those ideas down and getting those sounds in that you want before somebody plays those arrangements. So that is the IK Multimedia MODOBass. Now, I'm sure you're expecting an upright bass, so I'm just going to take MODOBass off there. There we go. Now, the upright bass is from Straight Ahead Samples, and they made the Birth of the Trumpet sample library from the last video, and they have a lot of kind of jazz libraries ready to go. And this is the upright bass. This is what it sounds like. Brilliant. Really great. And there's a couple of things you can tweak in this one as well. So you've got the different articulations. So at the moment I'm on quarter notes, which I'm set at 120 BPM. So it'll play those quarter notes for a full length in that tempo matched. You can cycle through them. So if you want just pure sustains, you've also got those. If you want eighths and you want it in quavers or more staccato notes, also does that. And there are various other things. Accented legato, you've got a body and neck and direct feeds to mix those mics, mix those inputs. Sample start, you can change with the legato fades. There's a lot to this. There's an awful lot to this. And it's one of the more kind of detailed upright bass libraries that I've found. I don't have a whole lot of them. I've got one or two others as I was getting to this point. But they are, it's great, sounds really good, and it fits really well with the straight ahead jazz drums that we'll get to that I'm using. They complement each other really well and have that kind of very real human sound to them. It doesn't sound too digital or computerized. They work really well. So that's the upright bass, and that is from Straight Ahead Samples. So that's your basses. That's kind of covered that section, the rhythm section. I've got my drums. And auxiliary things to come. But next up, let's have a look at the guitars. So I have a very basic guitar setup on here. This is the Orange Tree Samples Archtop, and it's one of those Archtop electric guitars, and it's a brilliant library. It sounds really great, and it's in one of the kind of the top range price wise. But I've gone through a series of different guitars getting to this point. I had the Native Instruments Electric Sunburst, which was great. I had a melody instrument and a chord kind of instrument as well, but it wasn't quite the right tone. This kind of jazz Archtop sample library is just for that tone. It's for that kind of Freddie Green style of playing, you know. It sounds a little bit like this. Brilliant. It's nowhere near as a real guitar, of course, but it really gets the point across in these arrangements. And there are so many different articulations as well. You've got your, if I just switch these over, you've got your palm mutes as well, which are very useful for those kind of funk. Kind of arrangements, and there's loads to it. You've got fully muted harmonics, grace notes, buzz trills, slides, velocity slides, quarter note slides. Really advise going and looking at the video from Orange Tree Samples on this to see all those different articulations. I'm not going to jump into it just now. There's loads of different articulations there, and also a strum engine. So in this engine, you've got these button keys will actually play a pattern, preset pattern. So if I just go to this first preset pattern here, that, where's my C0 down here? So I'm playing my chord with the right hand and I'm going through these patterns. You can change here in the chords whether it will play your chord exactly, transpose it directly over to that strum engine, or whether it's going to kind of play a chord that is more realistic for the guitar, but using the chord you've played as the inspiration for that voicing. Yeah, it works really well, and it's the best I've come across so far for this kind of guitar. I will occasionally pull out the electric sunburst if we need a more poppy guitar or a rocky guitar, but this is always in the template as a go-to for the guitar to get going straight away, and that's from Orange Tree Samples. Next up, we're into our drums now, and I said before that I've got the Straight Ahead Samples jazz drums that complement the upright bass really well, and here it is. This is jazz drums, and you've got these mixers for the different parts of the drums, and a whole host of things mapped to the keys below. So if I find my octave, there we go. So this is the kick, and it's a quite high kick, a jazz kick, if you like, and a whole set of different instruments across all these keys. So this is what it sounds like. So it's great fun. It's really great fun to play. And you've got these kind of, if I run through them all. Set of things. And these notes at the end. Are actually for choking those cymbals. So there's a lot more to it. I did used to use the ProjectSAM Swing More drum kit, and that's really playable and works really well, but there's not quite as many kind of tweakable things and extra sounds that you get in this library. And that's not only it, it's not only just a playable kit, because often people prefer to use kind of tempo mapped loops and things rather than playing it on the actual keyboard or like an electric drum kit. So this has that too. So if we head to the first C after the playable kit, you'll hear that side stick. Now, you'd expect there to be a bit more in the loop, and that's the beautiful thing of this this sample library, is it's split up into parts of the instrument. So here you've got the snare and kick comping in the green area, and an octave higher, you've got the cymbals. So if we play two of those together, they work really well together. And if we move along, they get busier as you go up to that octave. So say we go with this one and this one here. So we'll play these two together. Like that. So that can kind of get you right off to a great start with some swing rhythms, and they sound really great. You also have these fills, and then an octave higher than that, you've got some cymbal kind of swells. They actually save you kind of playing them manually. They wouldn't sound as realistic as that manually anyway. You've got stick clicks. And then this button here this key here will do like a feathered kick. It's very quiet. But that's great if you just need that drive through there with something else that you're playing. It's a great kit. Again, like the bass, you've got the different tempos, tempo instruments, so that the loops are better matched to the tempo that you're playing at. As always, this is down just as a medium tempo. I'm often writing arrangements in that speed, so it makes sense to have that one there initially. Again, you can output all these to different outputs to mix the kit more. If you want a different kick from a different library, for example, I would do that and just mix those out. But yeah, it's great. It's great. It's really good. And occasionally I will still use the swing more one if I need something that's a little bit more biting, because this is a very realistic jazz kit. But sometimes that kick doesn't quite cut through as much as you'd want. It works great for the smaller ensemble stuff. If you've got a trio or a quartet, fantastic, does the job. But for a 17-20 piece arrangement, sometimes the swing more just cuts through. So yeah, great, it's there, and it works really, really well. So that's the jazz drums. Now next up, we've got some of the auxiliary instruments. So I've only got a couple here. We've got a Celeste and a Vibes. And the Celeste's kind of doing the job of Celeste and a Glock. But this is the Sound Dust Dulcitone. It's the 1800. It's 1884. It's the 1884. So it's the Sound Dust Dulcitone, and I know a Dulcitone is not a Celeste or a Glock, but this particular instrument just cuts through exactly in the right way. I've found from trying it out with different instruments. This is what it sounds like. But it's got a real kind of fragile human sound to it. I really love those arrangements of Sinatra. Recently bought this album, actually, the Wee Small Hours album, and the title track on that album has that kind of sort of sound to it, with some strings and some lovely warm textures. But it can be also used to just pick out accents in things that you need with hits, drum hits and brass and things. It works pretty well mixing those as well. So that's there for that. There's plenty more you can do with this. These are all the different octaves, 1 through to 4, your notes on and off. You can have a rotor if you need that. A bit of dust for a bit of distortion, should you want that. Different reverb, convolution reverbs. You can pan, change the attack and the release of these. There's a delay engine for adding delay to these layers, if you wanted that as well. But I just have this kind of box standard, simple preset for jazz that is just the closest I can get to a kind of Celeste or Glock sound. And the kind of added note on, note off noises just add to that realism. They sound really good. And they can be used in a more exposed arrangement as well, which I'm always looking for things that still work really well in an exposed arrangement, not just the full pelt, full band arrangements. That's the Celeste, or the Dulcitone. Next up, we've got some Vibes, and this is from good old ProjectSAM Swing More. And it's a great sounding vibraphone. The range is fairly small. It's a standard range, but if you're used to a vibraphone that's mapped from the lowest key to the top key, it's not going to do that. It's a much more realistic vibraphone. I have the motor matched to the sustain pedal, so the sustain will bring in that motor effect for a very kind of 60s vibraphone sound. This is what it sounds like. And then with the motor. A real kind of vintage 60s big band sound, almost filmic arrangements. It works great for. Just a bit of reverb on here, but a close mic setting, because I really want that kind of closeness, the realness to shine through. There are tremolos in this library. should you want them. I don't think the tempo match, you can't change the speed of them. And when I tried changing the tempos, it didn't do a lot. And some octave runs, which you can change the speed of, and this kind of dial here, just like we had with the falls with the saxophones and those other libraries, it does the same thing there. It will slow them down, and it's just stretching that sample. But that's great. I don't really use the octave run or the tremolos. It's usually on the single and the motor sustain sounds. But yeah, that in conjunction with the Celeste can really bring an extra vintage vibe to your arrangement, 60s kind of sound. And those two are in there because I will quite often use those. And when we're playing live, we don't actually have a vibraphone player, but I do have a second keyboard needed for anything that really needs those extra instruments to give it a bit of a sparkle, a bit of a sheen on top. And we're just about the last instrument now. This is another drum kit, and it's from Ujam Instruments. It's Ujam Deep, which is a drum kit, especially for those kind of 60s soul or funk or R&B kind of styles. And it's a very close-up kit. There's a lot you can do with it, but just right out the box, it sounds really great for even Motown-y sort of vibes. This is what it sounds like. Yeah, good fun. It's good fun. That really works for those Motown, funk, R&B, soul kind of non-jazz, non-swing arrangements. There are many things you can do here. You can change the drum kit. More of a short funk sound, a bit of punch. And then you've got some mix presets as well. So you can have a kind of slammed kit. More of a lo-fi sound, an aged sound, an aged classic is usually what I go for. That sort of thing works great for. Works really great. That is the Ujam Deep, and I don't use that as often as the others, but there are occasionally some in the pop set, some tunes that need that kind of poppier kit, and that really does the trick. That's the rhythm section. So quite a lot going on in there. I won't use them all in every arrangement, but the kind of ones I use the most commonly are in there and ready to go. Any questions about any of them, do drop them in the comments. And if you want me to look into one of the sample libraries in a bit more detail, let me know and I can do that too. This was just a very brief kind of look at the rhythm section, but do go and check those out and have a listen to other demos of them and people using them in arrangements. I'm going to play, as always, a little arrangement of this section in action, just the rhythm section, so you can hear how all of those different instruments work together in the mix. Next up, we're going to have a look at the mix of the process in the next video, and in a later video I'll look at kind of exporting to Surveyor to create the parts for the band. So do subscribe and stick around for those if you're interested in the rest of the process. Thanks for watching.